So, a little preference. This happened around October 2 years ago. I, female, had just turned 19. I worked at a large clothing store that was very big on Halloween. A very, quote, value-filled place, if you will. I lived a decent distance from it. It took an hour plus with 1 or 2 buses, depending if it was nice enough out to walk, and to get the train there. From home, it would be bus, train, then bus, or walk to work. So, to the story. I'd gotten on my first bus, sitting in my usual spot near the back door. There was a guy who was already on the bus, towards the front, and 3 seats that can fold up for a wheelchair. That kinda just freaked me out, so I paid attention to him. Headphones in, but no music on. A woman with a hijab have gotten on the bus and sat next to him. Again, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I was feeling that something bad was going to happen deep in my gut, feeling the adrenaline hitting my system. With a dirty look towards her, he gotten up and moved a seat away from me. Okay, nothing happened, no big deal. Still on high alert, my stop came. So I got off, and so did he. Again, I was trying to keep calm because I can get anxious sometimes. This is a train station that a lot of people come to. I walked a little faster, and before going down the stairs, checked and saw that he was behind me and staring right at me. Oh shit. Okay, book it down the stairs. Still behind me, still watching. I'm down in the station. He sits down facing the train line I need to get on. The station is long with a train on either side. I decided to stay on my feet and gently walk around the whole platform and not commit to anything, always trying to watch what this guy is doing. He had his phone resting on his knee, and when I was in his range of view, he was following me with it, and he was freaking filming me. My train came, so I got on, and of course so did he. I'm still freaking out, trying to figure out what the hell to do. I decided to get off at a station before mine and get right back on before the doors closed. He was by a different set of doors, and it was still crowded, so I hope he wouldn't notice me when I get right back on. I did that and moved back a car, so I wasn't sure if he got on or not. Again, I'm freaking out because I didn't know what to do. I thought of going to the police, but everyone I've talked to that had anything similar to this happen said that they went to the police and just pretty much wasted their time. Anyways, the last station, my stop, was above ground, but you needed to go underground to leave the station. I got off and moved quickly, and he was standing in between the 2 sets of staircases on the phone watching me and smiling. I ran down the stairs and around the corner. I put my hair down, took my backpack and jacket off, and rolled down my pant legs to hopefully disguise my boots a little. Holding my backpack in front of me, I walked steadily out the station without looking back. There was a bunch of apartment buildings nearby, so as soon as I could, I ducked down and sat in the entrance of one and called an Uber to take me to work. I broke down once I got to work, and one of my managers cried with me because she had experienced similar things like that before. She told me she would give me a ride home at the end of the night. We drove by the bus stop that I'd gotten on earlier, and the guy was still standing there. Thank God he didn't see me. The next day and days after, I changed up my look, different glasses, clothing, bag, no piercings in, and I literally wore a wig, as well as took a different bus at an earlier time. I've never met him again, and since then, I've moved. So Mr. Guy who followed me and filmed me, let's please never meet again. Hi everyone, I wanted to start off by saying that I posted this story a while ago, but it was on a different account, one I've since deleted, and a lot has happened with this person since the first time I told the story on here. I tried to find the post but couldn't, so I'm posting it again because I'm currently scared and angry over this situation. Anyway, let's get started. This was when I was a freshman in college in October of 2018. A guy I'll call Ron Jones stalked me. I met Ron through one of our mutual friends, Chris, because we were in a school club together. When I met Ron, I thought he was kinda strange, but he was nice and seemed interesting. He claimed to be Slavic and had an accent to back that up. I thought he might seem weird because of our cultural differences. I go to school in a rural southern area, and I figured the culture shock between here and wherever he was originally from was a lot to handle. Anyway, we exchanged numbers and texted infrequently for a couple of weeks. On October 3rd, 2018, a friend of mine and I went out to a drag show on our campus. We weren't out super late, but it was dark when the show ended and we began walking back to our dorm. I had been texting Ron a bit during the night because he was unable to get a ticket to the drag show and he wanted to go. He was asking me how it was. At some point in the conversation, I mentioned that I wanted to grab some orange juice on the way back to my dorm. Don't know why I mentioned that to him. I think I was just trying to make conversation. My friend and I stopped in the convenience store near the building so we could get said orange juice, and Ron was already there. He said something about buying the juice for me, and I thanked him, but declined. He got kinda mad and started to walk away, which was odd to me, but I just let him go. My friend and I walked out of the store and saw that he was standing outside. Our dorm was actually from the building the convenience store was in, so he saw us enter the building. My friend and I parted ways, and I walked up to my room, which was on the second floor of the building facing the convenience store. I kick myself for doing this now, but I went to my window, opened it, and yelled down to Ron when I saw that he was still standing there. I apologized for declining his offers to buy me juice because I felt that I had been rude. He stood below my window, started talking to me about random stuff, and at one point, he said something that was rather odd. He said, "Can I flirt with you? I enjoy doing that." I just laughed and said, okay, because I had no clue how to respond, and I figured he was just a flirtatious person. Stupid, I know, but that's not the dumbest thing I did. I ended up going outside to sit and talk with Ron for a little bit because I felt bad for being, quote, rude earlier. As if declining someone's offer to buy you something is rude. Jeez. While we were outside, he didn't say anything of note, and he was actually pretty normal. It got cold out, so he asked if we could go inside and talk, and I said sure. At this point in the year, I'd had several guy friends come to my room just to do work and chat, so I didn't see an issue with it, and things started out normally, but quickly got scary. Out of nowhere, Ron basically turned into a different person when we were alone in my room. He stopped blinking, he held eye contact super intensely, and he was laughing in this really low, creepy way. On top of that, his Slavic accent disappeared. That's when he told me he lied about being Slavic and that he's native to the state or college is in. He got increasingly more creepy. There was nothing I could do about it because I had a single room my freshman year. At one point, he grabbed me in for a hug and wouldn't let go of me until I said, "Let go of me right now," 3 times or so. He told me he'd done a lot of bad things and that if I wanted to put him in jail, he could have given me the names of the people who have evidence against him. He said he hates Jews and black people and everyone until they gave him a reason not to hate them. He said a lot of weird, nearly sexual stuff to me as well. Like, he went on and on about how showering alone isn't fun and how it's better with another person and how he'd be willing to do that if I wanted to. Keep in mind, this guy had a girlfriend and he acknowledged that. He even said he'd go after me if he weren't dating someone, which freaked me the hell out. He asked if he could sleep in my room and I said no, and I used that to tell him that I was ready for bed and that he needed to leave. As he left, he said, "Do you want to know how unsecured the locks on your door really are?" as he pulled a few IDs out of his wallet, all with different names. I closed the door and looked through my peephole. He stood there, looking at the door for an uncomfortably long time before leaving. After that, he called me multiple times throughout this month. Always at weird times. He started appearing everywhere I was around the campus. The friend who had introduced us, Chris, actually started walking everywhere with me because he noticed Ron following me around and lurking around the corners when I couldn't see him. Apparently he was around me a lot more than I realized because Chris began carrying a knife whenever we went places. Ron was everywhere, and he would come up to me and put his arm over me and whisper stuff like, "We need to talk," whenever he saw me. For a while, he would lurk outside my dorm, but that stopped all of a sudden one day. I later found out that Chris had told my RA about Ron and that he had been banned from my building. The only reason I hadn't done that myself was because I thought I was overreacting. I wasn't. I blocked him on my phone and he hasn't contacted me since. He did apologize to me one day on campus last semester when we ran into each other, and I was actually willing to accept it and move on until recently. So here I am 2 years later, and everything that happened with Ron has come back up again. I found out recently that he has a history of stalking women, like an extensive history going back at least 5 years. I met another victim of his who he had stalked before coming to my university. She had gone to community college for a bit, and he stalked her while he was also a student there. He followed her out of university after apparently being suspended from the school after 3 separate stalking incidents were linked to him. The victim that I met told me something worrying. Ron is currently an RA on our campus, and she was one of his residents, which she told the residential office that Ron had stalked her in the past. They told her that all they could do was have her move dorms, which she did. They then said they couldn't do anything to discipline him because the stalking didn't occur at our university. She and I reported our experience with him to the residential office, who then tipped off the campus police, who had then spoken to the dean of the students. The thing is, though, when I gave his name to the residential office, they had no idea who I was talking about. He had given me a fake first and last name, and I had to do a lot of searching to find out his real name. I knew he was sketchy when I saw the 4 separate IDs in his wallet, but I didn't ever think he had given me a fake name when I met him for the first time. After talking to residential living, I talked to the police. When I talked to the police, they didn't seem to care about what I had to say. Actually, the officer I spoke to talked over me while I was explaining the times he had followed me, and said that he'd heard all that he needed to hear. I spoke to the dean of students, who asked me the same clarifying questions about the police report he'd received. The police had mixed up several details of my story with the stories of other victims. Apparently, more people than just myself and the girl I met have come forward with information about this person. There are even more events that he got physical with 2 separate people before coming to this university. Last week I saw him on campus. He's still an RA, even though multiple women had spoken to the higher-ups about his behavior. If I hear from him, I'm issuing a no-contact order to ensure that he stays away from me. Right now, though, that feels like too much of a hassle because we're all going home for a 2-month break due to COVID education anyway. That's kind of it. It's anticlimactic, and there's no sense of justice in all of this, but hopefully this story teaches you to stay on your toes and not to think you're overreacting when someone is being sketchy. Stay safe out there, guys. Hi, for the record, I'm a female. I'm turning 19 this year, and this story happened when I was 15. Oh, and also, I'm from France, which can explain my English mistakes if there are any. When I was 15 years old, and just got into junior year, I created my first Twitter account that I deleted because of this story. Some information. I didn't tell anyone my username, neither my friends nor family, because I didn't have any. My profile picture was an avatar, so no pictures of me on the account. And as location, I said Paris, because I lived in the suburbs. I didn't have many followers, 20 or maybe 30, and I didn't follow that much people, so my Twitter was not really interesting. One evening in October, someone sent me a quite strange direct message. It was a 200 followers account, and the message just was, "Hi, my name's Rob. I just turned 17 and wanted to know if you lived in my city, because I will soon move in and go to the town high school, and I'm looking for friends." I immediately thought something was wrong, because there was nowhere on my profile where I stated where I lived. But after some thinking, I remembered a tweet I made a few weeks ago about buses, and I mentioned the city. So I just told myself he just looked up my city and found my tweet. His age wasn't shocking because I'm 2 years ahead of my classmates. I was bored, and he was polite, so I answered him. I told him I indeed lived in my city and go to a high school there. The discussion was natural, and we talked a lot that night, mainly about high school, about the food at the cafeteria, about the teachers, that kind of thing, but as it was getting very late, he tried to interpose some personal questions, like, do you live far away from the school? In a house or an apartment? Do you live with both your parents? There's 5 of you? You're not often home alone, right? I never answered because it was way too shady for me, and unfortunately, he didn't insist. Unfortunately, because if he did, I would have probably blocked him then and there. The next day, same thing. we talked a lot, and he was still asking me personal questions, like to get to know me better or whatever. So I asked him too, and he always answered with what seemed like honesty. I still didn't answer the questions about my house though, because he didn't need to know anything. It lasted 2 or 3 weeks, but it was enough for me to develop feelings for him. He was handsome, super kind, and it was everything I needed, because I was bullied for years, and even today I still develop strong feelings, but most importantly, blind trust in people who are friendly to me. In France, in October, we have a 2-week long vacation, and the day before back to school day, he finally told me he was coming to my high school because he finally moved in with his mom, and he asked where he could meet me for the morning break. I was so happy and relieved to be able to meet him, and told him to join me in the hall, but when he understood that there would be people around, he said he would prefer an isolated place because he was afraid he would not recognize me and didn't want to spend the break looking for me. It was a good excuse for me, so I told him to meet me in the 3rd floor bathroom because we weren't allowed to stay there during the breaks and no one would disrupt us. In my head, even though it was a little bit creepy, I still was in school, so nothing could happen to me, right? The next day, back to school day, I made myself pretty. I wore my best clothes, I counted down the minutes, and finally when break time arrived, I ran to the bathroom and waited. And when he arrived, it was him. He was not a catfish. He looked quite like his profile picture, but I noticed that he seemed a little bit too old. He looked 20 instead of 17. We talked a lot, we got along well, and at the end of the break, he asked me to go to the fast food place right by the school with him for lunch. I said no, because I didn't have any money, and I always refused for people to pay for me. It's a principle. He seemed very disappointed, but offered to walk me home after classes. I explained I have to take the bus, but that he could walk me to the bus stop. He looked disappointed again, but finally accepted. And that's exactly what happened, and it was so great that it quickly became some kind of routine. We met in the 3rd floor bathroom during the morning break, and he would walk me to my bus stop after classes. Surprising fact, I never saw him in the hallways nor at the cafeteria, but I thought at the time that the building was huge and there was over 1,500 students in here, so if our schedules didn't coincide, there was no way we could meet each other. This little game lasted until December, so almost a month and a half. The 14th of December was a Thursday. I complained about how lonely I was going to be that evening because my dad was out of town for work. My brother was always at his friend's house. My little sis was on a school trip. My mom had to work late, very late that night. It was very reckless of me, but after weeks, I thought I could trust him. That evening, he walked me to the bus stop. We both waited. I got in the bus, waved at him, and put on my earphones. I had 2 stops before my house. It was 7:45 in December, so it was already really dark out. And as I got out the bus, I had a really bad feeling. There was a very uncomfortable sensation in my stomach, and I felt like I was being observed. I pressed pause on my music, but kept my earphones in so that people thought I couldn't hear anything, and that's probably what saved my life. I lived in a suburban neighborhood, very silent, especially at night, with no visibility on the big road that the buses passed in. When I heard footsteps behind me, I understood I was right. There was someone following me, and he was not well-intentioned. At least, I could hear that he was not accelerating, so he was not trying to catch up to me. As quietly as possible, I tried to reach for my keys in my pocket and then finally pulled them out. I ran as fast as I could, the best sprint of my life. I don't know how it worked, but I managed to open and close the door before he could reach me. I then deactivated my alarm, which, by the way, confirmed that I was home alone, and took a look through the glass panel on the door. It was not a peephole, it was a whole window, so if someone wanted to see what's happening inside, they can. It was Rob, a few meters away, looking at me with a really creepy face. He followed me to my home, probably with a car, and he was clearly not here to chit-chat. I still don't know why I didn't call the police. I was totally paralyzed. We both stared at each other for a minute, and when I took back control over my body, I ran into the kitchen to get a knife. I got back to the door. He was there too, banging against the door. I feared for a second that the glass would break, but it didn't happen. That moment, I was pushing against the door, praying that it would not break, while he was kicking harder and harder. After maybe 5 minutes, he stopped and got around the house, knocking against every shutter, and got back to the door. He looked very angry, but then my neighbor's car reached my house. Then Rob ran away, probably thinking it was my mom coming home. On Twitter, Rob sent me thousands of messages before I could block him. He then deleted his account, and I thought I was done with this story, but quickly after, some accounts which had just been created followed me. Their account names were all a series of numbers and the first letter of his name, and as soon as I blocked one, another one followed me. I chose to delete my account. I couldn't make it stop, and it was too hard to endure because they were all sending me dozens of insulting DMs. Later, I talked to people who were supposed to be Rob's classmates, because I haven't met him again in days, but not a single one of them has ever heard about Rob. This guy was never a student at my high school. That is why I never met him apart from our daily meetings, and that is probably why he seems so old. I never heard about him anymore, and I'm still asking myself, what did he want, and what could have happened that night? So Rob, let's never meet again.